Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Bill Zielke, who's the Chief Revenue and Chief Marketing Officer at BitPay. Bill, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate you having me.
Bill, I'm excited to speak with you because I've heard about BitPay and different news and adoption and integration news over the years. And you guys have a great technology, great service that you provide, helping merchants to accept crypto. So I'm really excited to speak with you because you guys are building a key infrastructure, the ability to accept crypto and spend and so on and so forth. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. We're one of the few companies, Tony, that's been around a while. A couple years back, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary, which is a lifetime, as you know, in the crypto space. And many companies have come and gone, along the journey. So proud to be here.
For sure. So tell us about yourself. Where you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, yeah. Born and raised in the Midwest. I currently reside in Charleston, South Carolina, along the coastline. My background's I'm a payment guy, Tony. I've been around financial services and fintech most of my career, 20 plus years. And I started in the old school legacy payments, ACH, kind of the bank account where, everything was powered from a payment perspective, initially in paper check, but eventually digitally with bill pay, which is really where I started my career with a company called Check Free, allowing you to pay your bills online. This was right as the internet was really getting traction and consumers were beginning to use software solutions to pay bills. And that was really my first foray into financial payments. And, since then I've kind of moved into a lot of different directions and I'm happy to share with you. But that's kind of where I cut my teeth and really, as it's progressed over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you were at PayPal, Bill Me Later, eBay as well. I would love to get your perspective because, like you said, you're a payments guy. And do you see this as the natural evolution with crypto and blockchain of payments, right? You talked ACH and all the legacy payment models. And is that what, kind of gravitated you to crypto?
Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. If I think about my journey with payments originating out of the bank account through the ACH network, and then I look at what I did immediately following that, which was really the first buy now pay later company out there. It was a company called Bill Me Later, was purchased by PayPal back in 2008. We had about a 5-year run of helping retailers, some as large as Amazon, some as small as Newegg.com, essentially bring credit to the point of sale. And that's what buy now, pay later did, is it brought transactional credit, which has historically been in a mortgage or in a consumer loan. We brought it out to an individual purchase at the point of sale and let companies like Newegg and Toys R Us and many others essentially provide financing on an individual item. It had a lot of pros and cons. Certainly it was merchant pro. It was certainly favorable to the merchant to help have credit at the point of sale. But as you know, there's high interest rates that are associated with those, which often are passed on to the merchant in the form of a charge. There are interesting solutions, but I actually once we sold the company to PayPal, spent a number of years inside of PayPal, helping bring payments to the mobile environment through mobile express checkout, as well as a faster solution on a lot of merchants' websites. So I got to see credit-based payments, I got to see debit-based payments, and eventually, transactional credit types of instruments take place. And when I fell onto and kind of discovered blockchain-based payments, the light bulb went off that they solve for a lot of I'll call them the weaknesses of legacy payments.
Mm.
The largest of which, is most, folks that aren't in and around payments a lot don't realize how punitive card-based payments can be to the merchant. High fees, the merchant owns all of the risk. Merchants on average lose about 1% of their total sales to fraud. And the networks are passing that fraud right back to the backs of the merchant. Blockchain solves for all of that, eliminating consumer fraud because they're a push payment, not a pull payment. Right. And because they're on the blockchain, they're entirely transparent. They're immutable. It's entirely decentralized. And a lot of these same elements aren't just present in ACH payments or in card-based payments or certainly in buy now based payments. And so that's what the light bulb kind of went off in my head is, wow, low cost, low fraud, if not no fraud, very transparent to the merchant. And it's a good alternative because it's really designed for a digital experience. And then Most people don't talk about the fact that they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I wish our ACH network had a lot of those same privileges, and they're low cost, and the merchant has little risk. So that's kind of why I got into to blockchain-based payments. My kids and I actually started mining crypto back in the early 2019 as a
Wow.
way to just learn. And we were buying along the way, and probably have made more money on the buying side than we had on the mining side, just given that most of it was for learning purposes. You can't get that scale. But
Sure.
when you couple those learnings of what it can do to what it can do specifically for businesses on the payment side, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm so excited about blockchain. It's going to take a while. Buy now, pay later took a decade
Oh,
before
sure.
we saw full traction. I'm hoping that crypto happens faster. Crypto payments happen faster. They're already gotten some great momentum. We do about $1 billion in volume a year at BitPay for some very, very large brands that we can talk about. But yeah, it's I think a market trend that's here to stay, and merchants are embracing it, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible how things have evolved and blockchain and crypto being the next layer on top of the internet and payments and financing and all these things being disrupted, through DeFi and so forth. So I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but I want to ask a question just because we're talking about the evolution of payments, because with that is this drastic disruption, disrupting Swift and the banking system. And just the other day, I was trying to get a payment from Canada and I was having problems with JP Morgan and people just trying to send me a wire. And I'm like, you know what? Just send me in stable coins. And I got it the same day. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's so painful. I went back and forth. The bank couldn't figure out the code and why it was getting rejected. I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. And I'm like, now we at least have a solution. But with that comes incredible pushback, as we're seeing from governments and even the incumbents. What are your thoughts on that? We've got a bit of a fight on our hands, but the tech is here to stay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not an all too dissimilar fight that took place when the internet was just taking off, right? There were a lot of entities and a lot of naysayers, but ultimately it took working through those in order for the markets to scale, for the adoption to follow. And I think that's the exact same inflection point we're at right now. I wouldn't say that we've reached a fever pitch because we haven't really had a single set of U.S. based regulations that are consistent or consistently applied, that are clear. Some organizations like us, we've been KYCing customers for 3 or 4 years. We've had an AML monitoring program and transaction monitoring in place from day one. But other organizations are still getting there, depending on where they're located. And I think our government, at least in the U.S., has to make that standard and, more importantly, enforce it as a standard. Right now, as you know, or maybe you don't, they're governing through enforcement,
Yeah,
which is very, very difficult for organizations, in a lot of cases, very expensive for organizations. And until we are moving beyond that, and we have one standard that everyone can follow and that's consistently applied, that's, in my mind, going to be a barrier for us to really get scale. I'm still happy to report that year over year, transaction wise, we grew. With the
wow.
price being down, our volume was down, but more users are transacting. That's a positive sign amidst what's really happening in the industry from a regulatory and from a compliance standpoint. It's also a testament to their strong demand. And we also have a lot of great merchants that are continuing to embrace, on top of the consumers continuing to use. And I think that's a good testament. But I think, to your observation, until we have consistent regulation, and I'd even be as bold to say, and it's consistent across the globe, U.S. can't do something entirely different than Europe. It's entirely different than Latin America, because it just makes it too difficult, I think, for users to comply, and ultimately for solution providers like us to administer things on a global scale.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. To your point, it has to be some consistency around the globe. For those who may not know about BitPay and all the services that you guys offer, can you give us a brief overview of the history and all the bells and whistles?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. We were founded in 2011. Two founders, Stephen Pear and Tony Galippi, two early adopters of Bitcoin in the mining space, as well as in trying to figure out what the use cases were for Bitcoin. And they ultimately came up with, let's process payments. Let's process Bitcoin payments. Today, we are the world's largest crypto payment processor, Bitcoin still being the lion's share of our volume. And we offer really two principal services. On the business side, the ability to accept and send crypto. So a business that wants to take Bitcoin like Gucci or AMC Theaters or PacSun can use BitPay as a way to accept cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others. We can talk more about that in a bit. But the real important point, Tony, is that many of those businesses don't want to touch or hold the crypto. They don't have the competency or expertise. And that's where our business model that Stephen and Tony created so long ago really has application. Is we stand in, we take the consumer's crypto ourselves, so we own that risk. We shield the merchant from that risk, and then we settle however that merchant wants to settle the next business day. Could be euros, could be dollars, could be Australian dollars. It really just depends on what their interests are. That's the acceptance side of our solution. We also enable those same merchants to send out crypto, whether it's a crypto reward or whether they want to pay employees. It's the other direction, right? It's the disbursement of cryptocurrency. So they fund in whatever currency they want, dollars or euros. We send out the crypto to the user and handle that last mile, if you will, of that disbursement. So at a high level, those are our business solutions, the accept and send. Today, we have thousands of merchants that are using that platform. They can come right out to our website, bitpay.com, and sign up. They can either go through a self-boarding process or we'll handhold them. We have our own integration team that will work with them through testing and through certification to make sure they understand and it's fully operational and working. We also have a number of consumer offerings. And we've been, as I mentioned, around for quite a while, 10 plus years, and offer a self-custody wallet. So the user is in control of the keys, the private keys, and it's not a custody-based solution. We can't see or touch the crypto, have no access to the account. It's entirely controlled by the user. We call that service that's available through the BitPay app. And they can do quite a few things in the app. They can buy crypto through a whole list of buy crypto solution providers. Like Simplex and Wire and MoonPay, some of the largest buy crypto service solutions. They can also swap crypto through a relationship that we have with Changelly. You mentioned earlier our debit card. We've got a debit card that folks can take the crypto that's in their wallet. They can top up a debit card and spend anywhere MasterCard is accepted. And then last but not least, they can make purchases inside the BitPay network. We have thousands of merchants that offer crypto acceptance. They can use their BitPay wallet in order to fund those purchases. And many users do that, whether they're buying jewelry or watches, Bugatti cars, yachts, lots of different very high-end merchandise that they can purchase through our wallet as part of our solution set as well. So that's more the consumer side of our business. We have literally over 10 billion in crypto assets stored in the BitPay app. Wow. So this is a product that's really, it's engineered for folks that want to spend crypto. That tends to be a more whale-oriented solution provider or a user who tends to have a bigger balance and uses crypto. Maybe they live their life on crypto because they believe in the value.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, two sides of the business, that you got the B2B and then the B2C. And the B2C, I love that, it's a self-hosted wallet, so the users control their own funds. And we'll talk a bit maybe about Ledger and some things later on. On the B2B side, you mentioned AMC. I saw you guys are partnering with Dallas Mavericks as well. And any other big names that you're partnering with?
Yeah, here recently we've helped Gucci get north of 100 stores live all across the globe. Ralph Lauren here just a couple of weeks back announced that they would be supporting crypto in their Miami-based store with hopefully additional stores to follow. Louis Vuitton. These are some of the higher-end brands, and I mention those, Tony, because luxury goods are certainly something that from at least in the last 6 to 9 months, we've seen an enormous explosion in both user interest to make purchases as well as merchant interest to attract new audiences. That's likely the reason that many of these brands have adopted, and that's on top of some already great brands. We've had a history, of multiple years of a lot of our users wanting to use gold as a hedge. We power some of the largest gold sites, APMEX and JM Bullion, as well as many others, where users can move out of crypto and into gold as a hedge. That's certainly been a popular vertical. but electronics and gaming, travel, not-for-profit donations are just some of the categories that take place. So it's brands like Microsoft and AT&T and PacSun, you know, that really kind of give, I think, a lot of momentum to the space and give users a lot of choice of where they can spend their crypto. And we're adding brands all the time. We have some exciting new brands coming that we haven't quite announced yet, but we'll be sure to keep you posted on some of our announcements.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are some very big brands. And it's I love the technology and the services that you guys offer, because I think it's key for, you know, where we're headed, and the ability to invest, spend, and for merchants to accept crypto, just building out the ecosystem. As far as the cryptocurrencies that you support, obviously you mentioned Bitcoin. Is it like the top 30? You know, tell us a bit about that. You don't have to go through each amount, but maybe, you know, hit on the top ones.
Yeah, you bet. In general, Tony, we support the cryptocurrencies that are, one, best suited for payment. And that represents about 80+% of the coin market cap that's out there, right? So it's the larger coins that have utility, have liquidity, and then they, from our standpoint, they have payment suitability. We want the user bases to be large. We want the access to the funds to be available on multiple exchanges. And that gives users the ability to acquire. It also gives folks like us who take it in. Remember, we're accepting a payment, and so we need to have a place to be able to offload those and manage the risk associated with taking on those cryptocurrencies. So we're going to find the larger ones like Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash, certainly Bitcoin and Ethereum. Here, most recently, Matic on the Polygon network. These have large, very substantial acceptances at exchanges all across the globe, and give users a lot of utility and, I think, support. It also gives merchants something that's really important. It's often overlooked, and that's access to consumers. In the end, the merchant wants to grow sales, right? They're trying to attract sales. And by having a large audience, use Litecoin as an example. Litecoin has been a very, very popular coin. It's a very high percentage of our transaction amounts. It's below Bitcoin, but certainly gained steam. In fact, it's knocked Ethereum off a couple of times in terms of the most accepted coins. Wow. And so because of their interest in being able to spend Litecoin and the utility that we provide in giving places to spend it, there's been a great match. But in total, we support 15 different coins, 5 of which are stable coins, and we're adding them all the time. To the extent that the community's large, the acceptance is there, the exchange support is there. Those are the types of coins that we're going to continue to add to our network. And we take those, as you'd expect, we take those very seriously. We have a whole analytical program for how we go about the thinking before we add a coin.
Oh, yeah. And is there any concern, given, you know, the SEC right now, like we were talking about before, regulation by enforcement, there's no clear guidelines, concerns that, okay, let's say they go after Ethereum, just as an example, would BitPay then say, do the analysis, well, hey, we may need to pause Ethereum, or it doesn't necessarily affect, you know, the day-to-day until there's an actual ruling in concrete, right? You know, like Ripple's in this lawsuit, they're claiming XRP as security, but, you know, there's no formal ruling. We're waiting on the judge. You know, what's your strategy there, given the uncertainty?
Yeah, I think you summarized it quite well. When we were aware of the uncertainty surrounding XRP, particularly in the U.S., we actually paused support for the U.S. and we still have that pause today. We support it outside the U.S. Because there's obviously not pending litigation there. But until there is clarity and it's really a decision that is you know put forth, we'll continue to pause those types of those decisions. They're hard ones because when you do that, you alienate a faction of that crypto holder community, and so that has to take place with you know, some certain scrutiny. But those are the decisions that we have to make, and you know, that's part of being a crypto payment processor. You have to be on the lookout for kind of both sides, how you're maintaining the regulatory environment, but at the same time the needs of the user.
Yeah, it's tough for entrepreneurs and businesses and innovators when you have this uncertainty. On the B2B side, how are you custodying the crypto? Are you using like a BitGo or some other custodian?
Actually, no. So the way our model works, whether it's B2C or B2B, is a user wants to make a payment, and that could be on a website or it could be in a B2B sense. the customer that we have sends out an invoice that traditionally would go out via email through our email billing product. That invoice has a QR code. And what happens behind the scenes there, Tony, is the user's funds are in their own crypto wallet. Maybe it's a self-custody wallet. When they scan that QR code, essentially those funds are going from their wallet into a wallet that BitPay maintains on behalf of that business. So if it's a B2C or a B2B business, that organization never has to touch or hold the crypto. So that crypto is now in our possession. And what we will do is we'll either hold on to it ourselves, or in a lot of cases, we'll trade it off through an exchange. And we manage the financial risk, positive or negative, the minute that we take custody of that solution or of that crypto. And then the merchant, the business that we're supporting, they're going to get settled the next business day and in their chosen fiat. And so certainly we have to hold that crypto, but we're offloading it through our own trading desk, through our own trading operation, something that we over the last decade plus have become very sophisticated and very talented at doing. And that's part of the risk that we manage is part of our overall business model. But the merchant never has to touch or have really a custody solution that they have to maintain. Now, I say that our solution provider does allow them to bring their own wallet. If they want to hold the crypto, we will settle to them in crypto. And we have a very small percentage of our merchants, most of which are outside the U.S., that choose that option. In which case, we support really any wallet that they want to use, more than 100 plus wallets that the organization can choose. And we're agnostic. And in that regard, they're holding their own crypto. We're just settling the crypto directly to them.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. So for the most part, you guys are doing everything in-house and handling, all, like you said, taking on the risk as well.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right.
I don't know how much you can give or insight you can give on this, but for the most part, are these merchants hodling? Are they instantly, looking to get the cash on those cryptos that they accept?
I think it's a combination. It really depends on their business model, right? Certain merchants are going to be more prone to speculate, but in the B2B sense, we support a lot of accounting firms, legal firms, marketing firms. And in most of those circumstances, Tony, they're going to not be looking to hodl. They're going to be looking to unload. Sure. Certainly with the volatility here that we've seen here lately, more than likely it's going to be a very short duration.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now there was a partnership with MoonPay. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So on the consumer side of our business, inside the BitPay app, I mentioned earlier that we offer a variety of options for the consumer to be able to buy crypto. MoonPay is one of those options. MoonPay sits right beside some other options that we also have available: Simplex, Wire, most recently Ramp. Our whole strategy here is pretty simple, Tony. We want to give users choice in the cryptos that they can buy, choice in the price that is required. As you know, a lot of the solution providers charge different prices. Some are super high, some are super low. It really just depends on how they're organizing their go-to-market approach. And so in our app, we want to give the users complete choice and complete transparency and allow them to make their own decision. Many of these providers also will have to KYC, just like we have to KYC. And so certain users might build an affinity. And so that choice is important to them. It's, akin, I think, to the kind of the kayak model in the travel space or any of those types of travel aggregators where you've got choice, what route you want to take, what price you want to pay, what airline you want to be on. Many of those same, I think, elements are true as it relates to our MoonPay. But we're excited to have them as a partner. We're planning on announcing other partnerships as well, just to continue to add to our model, given the user choice. And ultimately, that we believe that's a good approach for the user.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love, like you said, you have choices, and you kind of like kayak and these travel aggregators. You just present all the options, and the user can pick what they would like.
Yep. Here recently, we've launched a capability in the app where we'll actually sort based on the lowest price, and we'll flag them as the best offer. Not necessarily the best solution, but certainly the lowest price. And so that's one way that we'll, again, just add value to our users, at least let them know. Maybe they've KYC'd another path. They're happy paying slightly more because they don't have to give their information again. That's, again, up to the user. We're not directing that one way or another.
And then recently there was some news about the sunsetting of the the BitPay prepaid MasterCard program. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're actually changing our sponsor bank. So to be very clear, we're not sunsetting the program.
Hmm.
We've enjoyed a debit card that's powered by crypto since 2014. We were one of the pioneers to launch a crypto-powered debit card long, long, long time ago. And from time to time, we'll change our sponsor bank. In this case, we're replacing MCB with a new partner that we've yet to announce. Unfortunately, there is a time gap between the old and the new.
Yeah.
And so, in a recent communication, we let our users know that effective by the end of June, we are making that cutover. There'll be a small month or two delay before we're able to stand up the new program, but I'm proud to report that it will be a new program with a lot of new features in addition to a new bank. And that's on top of some pretty great features that our users already enjoy. We have thousands and thousands of card holders all across the U.S. And one of the things that really makes our card different is the high limits that we have for the card. Again, kind of going back to that profile of who typically is a user of our self-custody wallet. It's a person or an individual that has a lot of crypto holdings, and they want to be able to have access to those and to be able to spend them readily. So they might top up 5, 10, 15 grand to our debit card and spend it anywhere MasterCard's accepted. Those same types of great features will continue to carry forward into our new program, but we're planning on launching some new capabilities on top of that, a lot of features that our existing customers have asked for. So excited to make some of these new changes. It's unfortunate that there is a little bit of a time delay, but in this regulatory environment, as you know, sometimes those are unavoidable, and that's clearly the case here.
On that note, was this as a result of some of the banking collapses that we saw recently? We had some bank runs, Silvergate and SVB and so forth. Was it related to that?
I don't know that the runs themselves or the collapses were the catalyst. I think, as you know, in the United States, a lot of crypto or banks that were pro-crypto are either changing their tune or reducing their exposure to crypto companies. It's probably more of that in terms of a switch out. And so as a result, we need to look for other bank partners that are more supportive and really looking to innovate in this area in terms of their growth.
For sure. And then there was also news about a $1 million fine that you guys encountered with the New York Financial Services Department. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it seems like there's been a lot of fines in the headlines, not just this year, but even in past years. And BitPay was unfortunately affected by $1 million fine that was related to some very old and very specific transactions dating in 2018 and 2021. We're glad to report that matter is behind us. We have rectified the noted concerns that were identified. And, Tony, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, out of an organization that's roughly 100, about 30 of our employees are focused on compliance and regulatory oversight, things like AML monitoring, transaction monitoring, KYC, managing our relationships with the different states and the money transmitter licenses that we have. So this is a big investment for the company. And I mention that because we take our environment quite serious. As I reported earlier, we were one of the first crypto companies to begin the KYC process. We were doing that way before many others were. And that has an impact on your business. But we did it because we know it's the right thing to do. We know that long term, it's required in order to have the industry scale. And it's investment that we believe is building things the right way. So, with the New York DFS, we're in compliance now. We're happy to have this behind us. And it's certainly something that we continue to invest in maintaining our organizational infrastructure.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a trend of these regulators, both state and federal, kind of going back to the early days where many of these companies, maybe along with BitPay, were in a startup mode, still trying to get things in the right place. And they're issuing these fines, but it doesn't mean, that's what the issue now. It
Right.
seems there's a trend of that.
Yeah, you bet. And as you reported, there's many different companies that have been affected by that. But hey, in the end, I think once they've had an opportunity to really set the regulations forth in a clear and concise manner that everyone can follow, I think the industry will be better off as a result of it.
Mm-hmm. So what's on your 2023 roadmap? I know you talked a lot about new partnerships and new integrations and so forth. Anything else you want to highlight?
More new merchants. merchants. In order for users that have crypto to have places to spend it, we need to continue to build out our merchant network. We have tens of thousands of merchants that use BitPay today all around the globe, and we're going to continue investing in finding additional brands, particularly ones in the use cases where customers want to be. I mentioned luxury goods. In the fourth quarter last year, we saw a lot of yacht brokers come online. So we'll find other categories like that, whether it's gaming or gold or travel. We have a lot of private jet providers, high-end automobiles. So we'll continue to add to that merchant network so that users have selection. I think in the third quarter of last year, we signed every major e-commerce watch provider. And so if you want a Bolivia, Omega, Rolex, a lot of those different brands are now available, whereas they weren't once before. Giving more choice on the merchant side, I think, is important. Consumer partnerships enabling buy crypto will also continue to be a major theme. We've already talked about the relaunch of our MasterCard under a new bank sponsor with some additional programs. We're also going to continue adding support for additional wallets. Tomorrow, we will announce a partnership with Brave, and Brave is coded to a specification that enables their wallet to work very autonomously and very seamlessly with very few payment exceptions with our payment service. And that's important. That's an addition that now brings 100+ wallets that users can choose from, whether it's Coinbase or BitPay or MetaMask or now Brave, to be able to make payments seamlessly out of those wallets. And that's necessary in order to facilitate scale. So you'll see us continue to add more wallets, I think, to our equation. We're also going to continue our focus on our disbursements engine, whether that's through use cases like payroll, where folks can receive a portion of their pay in crypto. Up until here recently, we supported Bitcoin only as a payout disbursement payment type. We've added Ethereum as well as USDC, a stablecoin, giving consumers choice and how they want to be paid and in what coin they want to be paid. So you'll continue to see us focus on building out that disbursement solution with more disbursement options as well as more installation. So excited about that capability as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't drop a little hint. We do have a very major product announcement coming out where whales can have new places to use their cryptocurrency. So I'll kind of stop it at that for a moment, but we're literally just weeks away from a new product capability, much like we've innovated with our card as well as our buy crypto in the app, where folks that hold crypto in the BitPay wallet will have yet some more things to do with it as part of this new product capability. So excited about our innovation in this area. The second largest team inside of BitPay is our development team. They are blockchain experts. They're a very, very talented group of individuals, and they help by bringing new products to market. And I'm excited to be part of such a great team that's really compliance as well as engineering focused.
That's exciting. A lot of great updates. I love the different wallet integrations. You mentioned Brave. As someone who has different wallets for different reasons and different currencies and all that, that sounds great. And how seamless could be to move funds and do your thing from there via BitPay. A bit of a hard question here for you, and it's hard to predict the future, but obviously you guys are building this great infrastructure. You're looking to scale it, you bring in the different merchants, and there's more people adopting crypto. Where do you see the payments aspect of this and the merchants accepting this, and maybe in 5 years, where and even a 10-year outlook, where do you see more and more people using crypto versus the dollar, cold hard cash, or even just regular payment methods? And then another hard question within that is, CBDCs are coming to, will BitPay facilitate in any way, if that's possible?
Yeah, you bet. I'll maybe tackle the second one first. As a payment processor, we're really agnostic to coin. Right now, Bitcoin is king. It's the lion's share of our transactions. It's the lion's share of our volume. And certainly that ebbs and flows as you move down the list of coins that we support. You see coins that are switching. So as it relates to central bank coins, if there's a coin that has utility, we will consider it, as long as that utility is one that our users want and our merchants want. We'll add it to our network. It's really just dependent upon when they're going to be available, where they're available, and their suitability, I think, for payments, given the merchant community and the user community that we support. So as a payment processor, we're going to support the coins that folks want to use. And so that's probably the easiest way to, I think, to think about that from our vantage point. Now, as it relates to kind of where payments are going to be, I personally, Tony, wouldn't be here if I didn't think blockchain-based payments weren't the future of payments. If you think about the problems that they solved that we kind of touched on earlier, it's just going to take a while for this market to get maturity. I go back to 2004 when we launched the first buy now, pay later solution, bill me later. Like I mentioned, it took almost a decade for that really to take shape. I'm hoping that blockchain happens faster, but I believe it will. And I believe it's because the value prop that is so strong to both the user as well as the merchant. We just got to get some regulatory support behind it. We need more big brands to adopt it. To take, for example, if you look at the United States, just a proxy, and you look at the organizations that are some of the largest that represent the majority of the e-commerce volume. Set Amazon aside, we've yet to hear what they're going to do, right? But folks like Shop.com, Newegg.com, and some of the brands I already mentioned, Microsoft, these are brands that, in a lot of cases are north of 500 million up to several $1 billion in online sales. They're already embracing cryptocurrency. And they're agnostic as to whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum. They support them all. Any that right. We would power, they're going to support them all. And so they're not trying to pick a winner or a loser. They're trying to get ready. And that's very similar to what happened back when PayPal first launched, when buy now, pay later first launched, and ultimately when a lot of merchants started taking card payments on their own website. So I think that same, I'll call it adoption, trajectory will take place in blockchain. And I'm hopeful in the next 5 years, we start to see even more momentum that we've seen. We look at, as a payment processor, we look at number of transactions processed, the volume of the transaction process, and the average order value. And on the transaction and the average order value, we're continuing to see that march forward. As the price of Bitcoin returns and some of the other cryptocurrencies follow with it, the volume will be behind it as well. But that, to me, are some of the telltale signs that will give us additional confidence that this is happening. If for whatever reason merchant adoption were to stop and users were to stop spending, that's when I think the red flags might go up. But at this point, we're not really seeing any indication of that. As a result, we're full steam ahead.
Yeah, and it just seems around the globe, especially in countries that are dealing with like hyperinflation and so forth, that they're moving towards crypto and they're looking to have merchants accept said crypto. As far as markets that you guys are, situated globally, are there any that you're seeing like maybe a surge? And I don't know if you can reveal that information, but
yeah, I mean, I would say, like many crypto organizations, our start and really our momentum has been in the U.S. and in the EU, particularly the U.K., with those being the largest two markets. But Latin America has certainly been an area of substantial growth for us. We've launched a number of new merchants that are in Latin America. And when you launch new merchants, you really provide utility for the folks that are holding crypto in those areas, and that creates volume. And so we've seen that volume. We've enjoyed it. We're continuing to focus on it. We've got our own outbound sales team. We also have our own online set of self-custody or self-boarding types of options, and we give a utility to those types of merchants. We've also seen a large surge. Crypto penetration in Australia is quite large, to some extent in the UAE, with certain merchants that are trying to service individuals that are in the UAE that are large holders of crypto. As you know, that area in particular is an appeal because of some of the tax advantages to the individuals that hold large quantities of crypto. And so merchants want to be able to support those users. And so I'm a believer that the value prop is strong for the businesses to want to serve those organizations. And we're a company that really wants to help make that connection take place, both on the acceptance as well as the user side. But the U.S. and the U.K. are probably, EU in general, are our largest two areas. Latin America is probably the one that's up and coming.
Let's talk about the crypto market at large. Last year was a tough year. Lots of collapses. Obviously, we had fraud with FTX, old-fashioned fraud. And, the industry took a big hit with the regulators and so forth. But the market's starting to rally. And I think time is healing some wounds here. Yeah. What are your thoughts? And do you see the 4-year cycles playing out with the Bitcoin halving coming up next year? And maybe we have another bull market and bear market cycle as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe, again, just looking at what past we've come through and what those learnings have taught us, we're in a period. In my opinion, it's a great period because this is the period where everyone should be dollar cost averaging, taking in some of these low price points as an opportunity for growth and long term expansion. And those that have been around crypto, that's a familiar approach, right? You break that resistance on the downside, you get an opportunity to buy, you buy, and then you watch things like the halving take place and that next bull market cycle take place. And we're waiting for that. We're excited about it. We've been patient for it, and we've been trying to educate our users, our holders, that this is an opportunity to do just that. We use our blog as one way to communicate. We've got lots of great articles on why self-custody is important, why you should be dollar cost averaging right now, just as education tools. But that's the consumer side. On the business side, we're just trying to help merchants get ready. This is a great time for merchants to self-board, to put payment marks on their site, to start their marketing rhythms, how to talk to these different coin communities. And it's an opportunity, I think, to get some of those blocking and tagging elements, complete. We just, wrapped up the largest Bitcoin show in the world. I think the sentiment is very common that folks aren't losing faith; they're really just being patient, and that tends to be I think the mindset.
Yeah, it's like the silver lining of some of this FTX stuff is it did force a lot of exchanges and companies to provide more transparency, proof of reserves, Merkle tree audits, and then I think further emphasize why self-custody is so important. And being your own bank and the root, the genesis of Bitcoin's creation. On that note, Ledger, the hardware wallet, they released a new service, and people are really upset because they found out there was maybe some sort of backdoor there where people thought they were self-custodying, but their private keys could get exported or whatever it is. What are your thoughts on that situation? And you guys offer a self-hosted wallet, which is a great solution. And what do you think about this situation?
I think it's one that users have to approach very cautiously. The first step is education, right? What does it mean to self-custody? What am I really taking control over? And that's for some users, Tony, but not for all users. Some users actually prefer a custody solution because they don't want that responsibility, or there may be lack the technical sophistication to really want to step into those shoes. But to me, it's one that the user has to kind of educate themselves and put themselves in that environment. We are firm believers that self-custody is the way to go. We don't offer any other solutions. We've had this solution in place for a very long time, really since the beginning, because hey, consumers needed a place to hold their crypto in order to spend it at merchant sites. The BitPay wallet and the BitPay app was our introduction on how they could do it. And we chose that entirely to be open source. Our wallet is an entirely open source solution. And we chose self-custody because of that. And we built our innovation on top of it. You can open our app, you can look at logs, you can see everything that's happening right there inside of your wallet. And we believe that approach is one, the long-term approach that will win out. And two is one that is right by the user. Because it's entirely transparent. It's blockchain, right? It has to be transparent, it has to be decentralized. The user has to have control and not pass that control off to someone else. That's our belief, and that's why we believe we've had some success in this area in appealing to those individuals that value those elements.
Final question here before we hit the wrap-up questions.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on NFTs, and is BitPay, I believe you guys also have the features to accept NFTs and send them and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, on the payment side of our business, we power many organizations that are looking to push their NFTs out into the market and have them purchased or paid for using crypto. That's our principal solution. Today, you cannot support an NFT inside the BitPay wallet. That's certainly something that we've got our eye on for a future roadmap, but it's not something that we support today. But many big brands, Tony, as you know, have really stuck their toe in the water with NFTs. This is above and beyond what we've always seen on the digital art side and the mass appeal that's had to certain users that are speculating on the value of some of those assets. But I think where we get most excited are brands like Lamborghini, who we've partnered with, and many, many others that are launching unique assets alongside of their physical assets as a way to appeal to their user. We have watch providers that have NFTs that are digitally displayed on their digital watches, whether that's an Apple Watch or an Android watch. And that type of installation, I think, is one we get very excited about because in a lot of cases, there's a purchase involved and there's a user that's already sophisticated, that already is a holder of crypto, that wants to be a part of this space. And we continue to see more and more brands wanting to go down that path, and we want to be a solution provider that can support them. So, I do believe that that's a trend that's here to stay. I think as these organizations want to get closer to this very high value community, a very sophisticated customer, these are ways that they're going to appeal to them to modernize their own brands towards their go to markets. And that's, like I mentioned, a trend that we continue to see.
Yeah, it just seems all the brands are jumping on the NFT train here. And look, there's tons of benefits. I mean, just in exclusive benefits and perks and continuing the customer journey. And then, I think even on the government side, we're seeing like I think it was the California DMV looking to put car titles on in NFT format. So it seems like the NFT tech is here to stay. In what ways and how it gets adopted, which blockchains and so forth is to be determined. But yeah, it's exciting. All right, so I got some wrap-up questions here for you.
Sure.
First is, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Wow. What would the theme be? I think in order to kind of really appeal, I'd like to see an e-commerce oriented metaverse where brands are all coming together, providing consumers a really unique experience that doesn't exist with so many different approaches that you currently have on the web. Almost a virtual mall that's metaverse oriented. There's been lots that have thought about it, but we haven't seen really any get immediate traction. So that'd be one that I think short term would bring a lot of buyers together, and merchants could really advantage themselves by appealing to that unique audience. Second, it would help us grow the base of folks that are actually spending crypto. There's a lot of hodlers out there, and there will be a tipping point. And I think a metaverse like that could be an interesting appeal to begin that process.
For sure. And then some rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Favorite food, probably sushi. I spent a bunch of time on the West Coast working with PayPal and eBay and many other companies, and built a love for incredible sushi. And you can't always get that on the East Coast. So probably sushi.
Favorite musician or band?
Wow. I've been listening to a lot of classic rock here lately. So Eagles, Fleetwood Mac. So probably kick it old school a little bit with some nice relaxing tunes in the classic rock era.
For sure. I'm a big classic rock fan myself. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? No, I got to give it up to Morgan Freeman. Probably Shawshank Redemption. She is an old time favorite, but a classic, one you can watch again and again and again.
Oh yeah. And favorite book?
Favorite book? It's a tough read, but it's insightful, especially if you peel it back. But probably Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Great insights around business, around life, and just kind of how you navigate, interpret, and build relations.
And when you're not working at BitPay, what are you doing for fun as a hobby?
I live along the coast, so being outdoors, sailing, golfing, some fishing, just enjoying the beautiful weather. We've had an incredible spring here in Charleston, and just love being outdoors.
Awesome, Bill. Pleasure chatting with you. I'm really excited for the future updates of BitPay. Like I said, I've been following you guys for years, so we'll definitely have to have you back on, as you launch your new merchant partnerships and so on and so forth. But thank you for joining me.
You bet, Tony. Enjoyed it. Thank you.